Okay, my big thing I said earlier, I think it's really funny that progressives after the election are doing huge events, organizing people all across America, and liberals, which I'm not super far left, I'm really not, but liberals are like having thought experiments and doing I don't know, thought think pieces. They're doing think pieces about the election, while progressives are actually organizing. I think it is an interesting dichotomy there.
2024 election. They have a problem that runs deeper than Elon Musk's assault on the government. Look at the places they govern. Strongholds like New York and Illinois and where I'm from, California. They're losing people.
Since the pandemic started, California is seeing an exodus, a mass exodus.
In 2023, California saw a net loss of 268,000 residents. In New York, 179,000.
New York City is losing some folks, right, some residents, but it turns out that New York State is also seeing the population drop.
And in Illinois,
the Illinois residents have been fleeing the state at an alarming rate.
The state's population has been in decline for the 10th year in a row.
Why are all these people leaving? In surveys, the dominant reason is simply this: the cost of living is too high. It is too expensive to get childcare.
It's almost like paying another mortgage.
It is too expensive to buy a home.
Very unrealistic to be able to put a down payment on a $2 million home with 2 kids surviving.
You end up having to live too far from your work. And so they're going to places where all of that is cheaper.
Every day, someone is moving to the Florida area.
She got an apartment 3 times the size of the one she had in Manhattan. Plus, there's a wraparound debt.
Yeah, I can definitely understand.
Go get that, 4-bedroom, 3-bath house I had in Texas.
Yeah.
I know these families. These families are my friends. I've lived with them in these places, and I've watched many of them move away from the place they love, the city they wanted to raise their children, because they could not afford to live there. You cannot be the party of working families when the places you govern are places working families cannot afford to live. You are not the party of working families when the places you govern are places working families cannot afford to live.
Okay, it sounds cool, all right? And perception is reality in this situation, how people perceive your policies and whatever. But like under Joe Biden, working class wages hit an all-time high, adjusted for inflation in America. Unions came back stronger than they've been probably in 50 years. And when we talk about the working class, it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural divide. People support Trump right now because of immigration, because they're happy to see brown people being thrown out of America, largely. There are economic issues we need to solve, because if Democrats and progressives and whoever on the left wants to get power in politics, we need to do good policies for people. Republicans divide people, we bring people together. They don't care about solving problems. They just make people fight each other, and when people fight each other, they crash the systems because it helps their friends make more money, all the billionaires. But saying that the Democrats are not the party of the working class, the policies are more working class focused by far than Republicans. But Democrats need to compensate more for policy because they're not going to hit culturally. They're not going to hit culturally because they're not going to be angry about race issues. They're going to have to defend minority groups, including LGBT plus issues. So like saying it's as simple as, oh, it's expensive to live in these areas, therefore Democrats are not the party of the working class. The working class that rejects Democrats is not exactly the urban working class. And by urban, I mean literally living in cities. The working class that really came out, the low propensity voters for Donald Trump, did not come from cities necessarily. It really was a big suburban shift and also a rural shift. You look at Hispanic voters who are moving pretty strongly towards Trump. The Hispanic population in rural America is also growing. So like it's a very, and I'm from a rural area, which is why Democrats need to hire me, but it's just so much more complicated than this.
Families, when the places you govern are places working families cannot afford to live. In the American political system, to lose people is to lose power. If these trends hold, the 2030 census will shift the Electoral College sharply to the right. The states that Kamala Harris won in 2024 will lose House seats and Electoral College votes. The states that Trump won will...
Yeah, but I mean, backing your legal system or constitution is a social and cultural movement largely. Molding the underpinnings of society matter more than just simple policy or making the conditions better. When you move the moral foundation to a more, I guess, neighborly perspective or inclination, then people will support policies that are better for everyone, and you'll be able to govern. So, like right now, I think Democrats need a compelling narrative to stand behind. And talking about this in terms of whoever has the people can have political power, that's true. But if the dumb propaganda is going to win out on podcasts, that dumb propaganda is going to win regardless of your housing policy. All the policies Democrats can pass, I don't know, perfect healthcare, perfect defense, have 0% crime rate, and if they have no messaging structure, Democrats can do things, and Republicans will take credit for all of it. Republicans will take credit for literally everything if Democrats cannot message. And that's a really big point to this. And as a politician, it's your job to message effectively.
Will gain them. So in that electoral college, a Democrat could win every single state Harris won in 2024, and also win Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and still lose the presidency. There is a policy failure haunting blue states. It has become too hard to build and too expensive to live in the places where Democrats govern. Our politics is split right now between a left that defends government even when it doesn't work, and a right that wants to destroy government even when it is working. What we need is a political party that actually makes government work. Democrats can be that party. They should be that party. But it requires them to confront what they have done to make government fail.
The government objectively worked better under Biden. Okay, objectively it worked better. And it's just like, again, you need a stronger, more compelling message. This sounds great to people who read New York Times and make the New York Times pages sticky. They read them so much. Their brains, the information sticks to their brains. That's what I mean by that. But in terms of a larger cultural movement, there's a reason why people like this don't really... they're not really successful in these different eras of politics that are more populist centered, where people want to hear anger and all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, let's make the government work better. Well, Joe Biden was one of the least popular presidents of all time leaving office, and he objectively did policies to make government better, far better than Republicans did. But people don't feel that impact until it affects them directly. So I still think this is a really reductive way to look at this.
I could tell you a dozen stories. In my new book, I do. But let me tell you here just one.
My new book, dude.
In 1982, so more than 40 years ago, California Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill to study what it would take to build a high-speed rail system across the state.
Make a choice. Change the chemistry of the country.
He liked what he saw, and so did California's voters. In 1996, California formed a high-speed rail authority to plan for construction. High-speed rail is not some futuristic technology like nuclear fusion or flying cars. Japan broke ground on high-speed rail back in 1959. You can ride on these trains elsewhere. I have ridden on these trains. So in 2008, California's voters approved Prop 1A, which set aside $10 billion to begin construction on a high-speed rail line that would connect Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Yeah, Americans really don't realize how much better infrastructure is in Europe. Europeans, and I'd even include Canadians, they live like 8 years longer on average than Americans do. Yeah, they have really good public infrastructure there. But I would say America suffers from, of course, the scarcity mentality. So, we have to zero-sum game. I'm pretty sure he's going to bring that up in this video. But also, culturally speaking, Americans are not the people to care about one another. They're not the people to trust coming together collectively for big projects that can benefit all. American culture is largely predicated on cars and suburbs. People want to be in the suburbs to not be bothered by people. They want to have cars so they don't need to ride next to someone on the subway. Europeans are just more collective minded. It's probably because they have higher rates of education. It's probably because they've gone through more as a people, as a country. Europe has gone through a lot more than America has in terms of modern conflict. We have not had one of the huge wars on our soil yet. So
it would run through the Central Valley. It would get there in under 2 hours and 40 minutes. And it would cost, they thought, $33.6 billion. California's high-speed rail authority estimated.
And you're still not going to get through the issue that private interests are largely one of the issues here, okay? You need a government that can say, okay, you have a private interest here. And they do this with highways, by the way. When they build highways, if there's an Amish community in the middle of a proposed highway network, they're going to make those people move or just like build a highway right next to where they live. So they already do that, but it really is private interest to have a lot of money. If you want to build a high-speed rail system, it's going to be hard to get that approved for many different reasons.
We'd be able to ride that train by the year 2020. And the news kept getting better for high-speed rail. In 2009, President Barack Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act into law. that had hundreds of billions of dollars to build the infrastructure of the future, and high-speed rail in particular had captured Obama's imagination.
Imagine boarding a train in the center of a city. No racing to an airport and across a terminal, no delays, no sitting on the tarmac, no lost luggage, no taking off your shoes. Now, all of you know this is not some fanciful pie-in-the-sky vision of...
Obama really did drop the ball as president. I'm not going to lie. He really did miss a lot of policy windows. He really did miss a lot of opportunities to push more policies that he ran on to make it very apparent what he did in government. The ACA is a mess. It is a mess. Obviously, getting rid of it would be much worse, but it is a system that's a mess. And my big thing with policy and campaigning is not necessarily that policy is going to win elections, but the policies you have and the interests you have is going to restrict what you can advocate for. So that's why a progressive politician will be more aggressive when it comes to taxing the ultra wealthy, or when it comes to saying we need a system past Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. And like if you look at liberal politicians and the way they campaign, it's far less aggressive, largely because it's hard to make an aggressive message out of let's maintain the current structures and go back to what we had a few years ago and make it slightly better. It's hard to message off of that, you know? So if we talk about these bold change policies, it doesn't need to be Medicare for all, but it needs to be something that is an improvement. And it's not like we don't have models all around the world for every healthcare system humanly imaginable. But our politicians are limited in their messaging by the policies and by the interest groups they are tied to. That is a big issue that holds Democratic politicians back. And until they can take a full messaging stance saying we are going to build this for the good of America, and if you don't want to do this, then we're going to primary you. Not authoritarian wise like Trump, not bypassing any constitution checks and balances, do it completely legally. But make it a point that we want to do this for the American people, and these individuals are standing in the way, But it's hard to do that when you're I don't know, like what happened to all this
of the future. It is now. It is happening right now. It's been happening for decades. The problem is it's been happening elsewhere, not here.
Obama wanted it to happen here. In California, where the voters had already begun planning and funding high-speed rail, was the obvious place. And the political stars had just kept aligning. High-speed rail's foremost champion returned.
And the most expensive campaign in California history.
When Jerry Brown won back the governor's mansion almost 30 years after leaving it.
Now, 30 years later, we're within weeks of a revised business plan that will enable us to begin initial construction before the year is out.
But it didn't happen.
Build initial construction before the year is out.
By 2018, it was brutally clear that nothing was going to be rideable by 2020. And the cost estimate, it wasn't $33 billion anymore. It had risen and risen and risen. By 2018, it was $76 billion.
Next level, let's level about the high-speed rail.
The next year, 2019, Gavin Newsom, who had served as Brown's lieutenant governor, succeeded him as governor.
Right now, there simply isn't a path to get from Sacramento to San Diego, let alone from San Francisco to LA. I wish there were. However, we do have the capacity.
Okay, we had the Great Recession happen in 2008, obviously. The planning, the routing is hard, and also, construction over private land was an issue, legal issues, land acquisitions, eminent domain, bureaucratic delays. But again, if you talk to a voter, they'll probably say, oh, well, the government doesn't work. The government's not efficient. But the truth is, the government's not efficient because private interests do not allow the government to be at its full potential. So with the rail system here, private interests are to blame for why it was not built. The same with solving the homeless issue. Private interests prevent public money from being effective. They create a governmental system where dollars are less effective in government and more effective in the private system, although the private system sucks at this kind of stuff. And they want to privatize like Amtrak right now, which is terrible. But if you have a bunch of private property owners that want to hold back the good of society, hold back the progression of society, America lets that happen. Europe is more aggressive. Europe is more regulatory in a sense of protecting regular people and in a sense of having private entities do things that are more beneficial for the overall society. Legally, of course, through law, but they're not as captured by big money as America is.
to complete a high-speed rail link between Merced and Bakersfield.
Merced and Bakersfield, a line no one would have authorized if it had been the plan that was presented in the first place. The latest estimate just for that line is $35 billion, as much as the entire LA to SF line was estimated to cost in 2008. And even this Merced and Bakersfield line, it's not predicted to begin carrying passengers until sometime between 2030 and 2033, if all goes well. I'm told now that finishing the LA to San Francisco line would cost $110 billion at least. California doesn't have anywhere near that kind of funding for high-speed rail. So they're building what they can right now with no idea of how they're ever going to finish.
Yeah, state funding is an issue. That's why you need federal funding for these things, of course. And states spend a lot of money on federal taxes. So if California and New York wanted to keep federal money, they could not do that for these purposes, although they produce a lot of tax revenue. But yeah, you would need like the grants you have through, or not grants, but like awards or whatever it's called, through infrastructure programs and infrastructure projects and infrastructure laws like Biden got done to help states do rail like this, and then more encouragement for projects such as Amtrak to expand. That would be the no-brainer thing to do, but there's so many different issues here. But remember, whenever there's a failure in government, Democrats, aren't perfect, and Democrats do bad things. But Republicans are always the ones making government suck. They want to kill government, so they make government fail so people don't like it. Republicans are always to blame. There's not one thing you could bring up in American history where Republicans made the government better, other than when Republicans were progressives like Teddy Roosevelt, and he did trust busting.
What went so wrong here? In October of 2023, I went to...
Thank you so much for $5, Bucky. Everyone drop a like on the stream. Thank you for joining me. Drop a like if I put this on YouTube. I don't know if I will. I think it's an important conversation. You could call into the stream too in like 5 minutes when I'm done watching this video. But thank you for joining me.
To Fresno, California.
For a little bit.
And what I heard as I walked that track with the engineers who have built it and the people overseeing it wasn't engineering problems. It was political problems. There are parts of the high-speed rail line that intersect with freight rail lines. But the freight rail lines, they're so busy in the holiday season that some impose a construction moratorium from October to December. So in those areas, construction just stops for months every year. Why did the authority begin construction in the Central Valley rather than near the megacities? Well, one reason was that when California applied for federal money, the Obama administration wanted bids that would improve air quality in poor communities. And so the $3 billion the federal government offered, it wasn't really to build high-speed rail. It was to begin building high-speed rail in ways that addressed air pollution in specific communities. The Central Valley is poor and more polluted than coastal California. So federal funding went there, and so did the initial construction. But that made it less likely high-speed rail would generate the ridership, the political support, or...
See, that's an issue, but also, again, the funding would be much larger. If you look up the bills that allow that, or that allocate that funding, again, it's still conservatives that make sure these projects fail. That low amount of funding is only available because of conservatives, because liberals would spend a lot more money on infrastructure programs that benefit, all people and the public, for public goods. We had that issue with the LA fires as well. Everyone said, the LA fires, the budget was cut, bro. The budget was cut. Mayor Bass and the Democrats cut the fire budget before the fire, and it's their fault the fire got so bad. And it's like, bro, you realize that Republicans wanted to cut the budget in half from what it was, and Democrats had to fight to keep it where it's at. Like, you realize under Republican rule, they cut the budget in half, and they probably make a private firefighting force that only covers rich people's, it's all rich people there, but rich people's houses, private forces instead. But yeah, it's one of those things where Democrats get blamed either way. But if Republicans were in charge, the issue would have been 20 times worse.
The financial backing to ever actually finish. And that, of course, is bad for air pollution in Fresno and across the state.
Thank you so much for the donation. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you. Everyone say Kit Kat in chat. Thank you.
Trains are cleaner than cars, but high-speed rails had to clear every inch of its route through environmental reviews, with lawsuits lurking around every corner. The environmental review process began in 2012.
And I also do agree that Democrats need to do shovel-ready projects more so things get built quicker. We have a lot of issues with that. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough. You don't really have a mandate to do that unless if you campaign harder. That's kind of what I mean about this whole thing. You don't really have the political capital to move the system that much. Someone said the end of freedom. I don't know, bro. Yeah, it's not the end of freedom for you, dumbass. You're a privileged ass white boy. I actually love you. I don't care about. I don't talk about race like that. I was just channeling my inner Jasmine Crockett, who I love. But also, it is true. You could say freedom's the end of freedom. I don't know, bro. Like, yeah, you're a privileged D-head. Like, of course, you think freedom's not being attacked. We have innocent people that America sold into slavery in El Salvador, and no one cares because you're a bunch of dumbass memers who just want to laugh at people getting deported. It's not even a deportation. We have innocent people sent to slavery, and you're saying they're all gang members. They're not all gang members, explicitly. And they violated constitutional rights to do it. They violated due process to do it, and you guys don't care. So yeah, that professional soccer player, the tattoo artist, and the handful of others, the few dozen other innocent people we sent to slavery in El Salvador, a for-profit forced labor prison camp, super prison, forced labor prison camp, slavery. We sent them there, innocent people. You don't care.
And by 2024, 12 years later, it still wasn't done. What has taken so long on high-speed rail is not hammering nails or pouring concrete.
Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting.
It's process. It's negotiating.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to go over some important information for members.
I'm sorry, but liberals talk like this, bro. Liberals talk like this. Progressives don't. Progressives are more like, okay, let's get to the point. Let's do this for the people. Liberals are the ones doing all the meetings with all the consultants before they move a finger. Like, I'm sorry, but
the public speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised.
Good morning, Elmer Lazardi here on behalf of the California Labor Federation,
the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers.
So my question is, why do we have to wait almost a whole year later to find out that they're not in compliance?
Negotiating with courts, with funders, with business owners, with homeowners, with farm owners, with other parts of the government. Those negotiations cost time, which costs money. Those negotiations lead to changes in the route, or the design, or the construction, and that costs money, and that costs time.
So what is he gonna say? Is he gonna say more federal jurisdiction to override that kind of stuff, or I don't know, more state jurisdiction to override all the interest groups?
Those negotiations are the product of decades of liberal policies meant to protect against government abuses, and they may do that.
Sure,
but they also prevent government from building quickly.
But they don't prevent. Okay, preventing government abuses and preventing abuse of government by private entities is such a stark contrast, because liberals have made the government more susceptible to corruption in the same way Republicans have, to a lesser extent for sure, and liberals at least regulate the big banks a little bit, especially after 2008 and other financial crises, and liberals will trust bust and bust monopolies and make sure there's less corruption in the US. But there still are loopholes in the system because of big money influence that liberals put into it. So like I'm sorry, maybe I'm not a liberal. I don't know.
More affordably. In the time California has spent failing to complete its 500-mile high-speed rail system, China has built more than 23,000 miles of high-speed rail. The Chinese government doesn't spend years debating with judges over whether it needs to move a storage facility. Its power leads to abuse and imperiousness. It also leads to trains.
Okay, dumbass guy in chat again. If the president can just say that person is illegal and that person is a terrorist with no backing, with no evidence, and you could put them in a van and ship them on a plane to El Salvador to do forced labor in a prison camp with no record of their name, with no due process, they can do that to anyone. That's taking away constitutional rights from every person. And if you look at the history of laws like that and presidents that do that, they end up using it against U.S. citizens that disagree with them. We're already deporting people if they make mean comments about Trump. So this is bigger than what you're saying. And by the way, saying that there are 8 to 30 million slaves in Central Africa, dude, in America, we have a constitution and due process. If you want to live in China, if you want to live in Russia, if you want to live in Hungary or El Salvador, move there. Don't bring their political systems here or their legal systems here. That's how you get a dictatorship. I know you dumbasses don't understand that. You're like, no one's immune to it. It's not a world you want to live in. We don't want to give the government that much authoritarian power. That is true authoritarianism, what you're advocating for.
And look, I don't want America to be...
And it's not like hard. And roundups? Well, what kind of country? It's 2025. The guy had a Real Madrid tattoo, and they said that was a gang tattoo, bro. Real Madrid. They think it's a gang tattoo. Sell him into slavery. America doesn't do that shit. At least we shouldn't. We shouldn't be cheering it on. When George W. Bush was doing shit like this, he had to hide it. But now Americans are okay with it because Trump does it. If George W. Bush is doing the same shit, it's Guantanamo Bay, which we did torture innocent people there too. that got swept up in so-called roundups. But also George Bush had to hide that because the American people were not savage idiots at that time. And now apparently American people are okay with that. The same justification that Trump wants to use to deny court orders is the exact justification that Adolf Hitler used to suspend the Constitution in Germany. I'm not making a Hitler comparison because Trump says mean things. I'm not making a Hitler comparison because I don't like Trump. Objectively, they're using the same legal framework to say that Trump has the ability to override checks and balances in the government if he deems it a national emergency and wartime powers at any time. That's the same justification Adolf Hitler used to shut down the Constitution in Germany before he took autocratic totalitarian control. Objectively, that's how he did it, through the legal means of the system. He was able to pound the legal system to a point where they let him suspend the Constitution. And Trump has already called to suspend the Constitution in his 2020 election loss.
To become China. But I do want it to be able to build trains, as China can, as Europe can, as Japan can.
Step in! Train doors are closing, step all the way in!
The Second Avenue subway project in New York City.
This is the first major expansion of the New York City subway in more than 50 years.
It was the most expensive subway project by kilometer the world has ever seen. Has New York dramatically reformed its policies to make the next one easier and cheaper?
Ladies and gentlemen,
liberals are boring.
next stop, 125th Street.
That comes with a $6.3 billion price tag, far more than Phase 1.
No, of course it hasn't.
Do you remember the Big Dig? What is the Big Dig? The Big Dig!
It's pretty hard to ignore the Big Dig. It is everywhere.
Did the decades of delay and the billions of cost overruns on Boston's Big Dig change how Massachusetts builds? Not really. California. California has the worst housing problem in the country. In 2022, the state had 12% of the country's population.
Well, here's the big thing, too. People in America, they make these arguments such as, liberals are boring. That's why liberals lose, because Trump is exciting and you guys are stupid and you like exciting people instead of people that know shit, because people that know shit are boring. But for example, yeah, black sites, Josh, you're correct. But yeah, the arguments I see in chat are, you're weird. Showing up legally is important, and the people that got sent into slavery, they were going through the legal asylum process, so you're wrong there as well. But you think every person that's not white is illegal because you're racist, and until you prove that you're not racist, if you keep saying shit like that, I'm gonna say, okay, I know it's bad for PR because people get offended, but if you think this is okay, you are probably racist because you have no sympathy for other people that don't look like you and that don't talk like you and whatever else. So this person was protesting the authoritarian rule of Maduro in Venezuela, okay? At one of the demonstrations, he was detained and taken to a building where he was tortured with electric shocks and suffocation, okay, with other protesters. When he got out, he escaped, and he escaped to America seeking legal asylum, going through the proper process. Now, he was deported to El Salvador with no notice, no legal counsel, no due process, no notice to the family, just disappeared to a for-profit prison hard labor camp, which is literally slavery. That's the definition of slavery. This person was a professional soccer player in Venezuela. He was never arrested or charged with a crime. He has a steady employment record as a soccer player, and he coaches soccer for children and the youth. Now at a maximum security prison, a for-profit prison, into slavery, accused of being a gang member for Tren de Aragua. The accusation now, the information we have now, because they provided none, the accusation was founded off of tattoos he had. One tattoo, which is a Real Madrid tattoo. And another example being a pose that he made on social media. And the pose are, like I said before, the hands that mean rock on. If you hear this entire story, and if you hear the story about the tattoo artist who fled from Venezuela for, who's gay and wanted to get out of Venezuela because of their authoritarian dictator. Okay? If you hear those stories of legal asylum seekers doing everything right, supporting communities they live in, working hard, doing the legal process, and our government, our president, said screw the Constitution, screw due process, screw the court orders, and they're laughing their asses off as they send innocent people to hardcore labor camps, death camps, essentially. They'll be worked until they're malnourished, and then they'll be executed, most likely. If they're not productive enough, they will be executed because they are now in slavery. Innocent people. And what they want you to do, what the White House and Trump and everyone in this picture is relying on, is the fact that your brain is closed, that you have no independent thought, and that your preconceived bias about people that look a certain way or talk a certain way, they are betting on you being, I don't use this word very often, racist, just fearful of others in general. Don't even use the word racist. You're being a bad person. They're betting on you to shut down every good part of your soul, every good part of your brain. They're betting on the American people to turn away from people who are suffering and to actively use our tax dollars to deny due process to people, call them gang members, say they deserve it, and send them and sell them into slavery. You got to take the mask off eventually. Either you stand against this or you support it. There is no in between. There is no in between. And you have to understand, by this same legal justification, the Trump administration made the claim that once you're over international water, there's no more legal jurisdiction from the U.S. anymore. So if there's a U.S. citizen outside of our borders, is there no more jurisdiction where they're protected by our Constitution, by due process? By their standards, they can accuse you of being a national security threat. They can accuse you. So if you ever have an issue, if you ever have a disagreement with King Trump, they can accuse you of being a terrorist sympathizer. They can accuse you of being a national security threat. And under their current powers, they essentially are dictators. And they can just say, you're a threat, we're going to ship you off to a labor camp in El Salvador. The Constitution, rights like the First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, they do apply to people in the U.S., visa holders. Those who are seeking asylum. Those same constitutional rights apply for them. It's the same amount of illegal. It's the same amount of lawlessness to avoid the court orders, to ignore the court orders, as it would be to do this to an American citizen. And by the way, the court said turn that plane around because they knew there'd be irreparable harm to the people on that plane. That they'd be in a for-profit prison camp, forced labor into slavery. And all the conservatives, all the Trumpers are laughing about it, bragging about it, just jolly, just super jolly about sending people who are fleeing persecution. They're happy that America's becoming these shitty countries. They're happy America's devolving to a lawless nation that punches down on the weak. They're happy America's transforming into these shitty countries that takes away freedom from people. They're happy America's going towards a dictatorship. They're happy America is throwing out people because they just want to see something happen. They enjoy the violence. They enjoy the power fantasies they have. And they're falling victim to this propaganda that's molding their brains in a primitive way to be okay with this brutal violence. And I know conservatives defend the January 6th pardons. He can pardon all the cop eaters. I mean, Trump can do that. They're political prisoners. They were in prison far too long. Who cares if cops died and lost eyeballs and lost fingers? Who cares if Trump said on camera or on video or on a recording he would just like grab women and he's held civilly liable for was found liable for rape? Who cares? He says some things. He may be denying the Constitution and calling everything illegal and just bypassing due process and doing everything our founding fathers hated about kings that our country tried getting away from. He might do those things, but you still like him. You still enjoy him because he's entertaining. He can easily, the woke mind virus they talk about, they can easily just shift your brain to do and think whatever they want you to do and whatever they want you to think. It's really sad state of affairs. And you wonder how people get lied into wars like Vietnam or Iraq and Afghanistan. You wonder how Americans get lied into these conflicts so easily. It's because you guys are so easy to trick. You're so easy to trick. And I really hope you stop doing that because it's going to come back and it's going to hurt you eventually. It should be hurting you already. I don't know what kind of person would be okay with this. But you can keep on just putting your fingers in your ears and going, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. But when you wake up, God is going to judge. Only God has that power.